Since the dawn of time, man has yearned to ride Poultry into battle. Unfortunately, the paths of technology and genetic engineering don't seem to be heading in a favourable direction. So for now, we'll have to make do with these. These are Halfling Light Cavalry on Roosters from the Assault group. Now, I posted a picture of these on Facebook earlier, and someone pointed out that the packaging makes it look a lot like the ass. Which it does, but you can see the rest of the word assault slowly appearing there down the side of the packaging. So, of course, everyone loves halflings, and everyone loves giant poultry. So, when you put those two things together, what could possibly go wrong? I'm intending to make use of these in my undead halfling army, so I'm actually going to be painting them as ghosts. But when I open these up and you get to look at the lovely potential plumage on offer, then I think you'll agree they would look very nice, painted as nature intended. Potentially in all the colours of the rainbow. So let's open up one of these suckers, shall we? Let's go for the Halfling Light Cavalry with Spears on Roosters, Pack 1. So here we have all the pieces. The roosters are separate from their heads, and they will go together like so. The Halfling Riders also come separate from their heads as well, and I like how there's a little notch for it to slot into. It's not just a flat piece, which can be quite annoying with metal. And just to give you a bit of an idea of the level of detail here with the feathers, I think you'll agree, very, very tasty. Let's open the command pack while we're here as well, shall we? Here we go, so a couple of command figures there to sit atop the mighty flightless birds. And I don't think we had this particular rooster pose in the previous pack, so there are several different ones. So I've got the bases that I'm going to use here. These will become my ghostly honour guard for my Undead Rhordian army for Kings of War. So I'm going to have 4 to a base, and I think they'll fill that up quite nicely. So I'll be back when I've got all these bad boys assembled, which hopefully isn't going to take too long, because there's not that many pieces. They seem to go together quite easily. So I'll be back shortly. Well, here we are, all based up and mounted atop these upturned plastic containers ready for spraying and then painting. I found that 4 was the right amount per base, it just fills it nicely. So that does mean we have 2 left over for the future. If I want to create another unit, they will certainly go in there. But for now, they're just going to be neglected. So putting them together, there wasn't too much flash, not that many mould lines to worry about, nothing too crazy to clean up at all. I thought the spears would be a lot more flimsy than they actually are. They're actually pretty tough. The weakest point, I think, on the entire model is probably the chicken legs. So if you're pushing down with any pressure on one of these things, make sure you're pushing from the inbuilt base, rather than from on top of the chicken. Otherwise you can bend the legs. But even then, both chickens have 2 solid feet attached to the ground. Not like some ranges where you'll see a miniature that just has 1 toe touching the ground and the other foot in the air, even though it's made out of metal, which is an absolute nightmare. So no such problems with these guys. I ended up using a reasonable amount of green stuff in this endeavour. I don't know if you can see, but I've put a bit of green stuff in around where most of the heads attach to the bodies on the chickens, because you can have a tiny little gap there. You'd only be able to see it from underneath, I think, really. So it's just for the OCD people to fill that in, I think. And then you can see, particularly on this guy, I've put a bit of green stuff between the rider and the chicken on all of them. I glued them on first without doing that, and then I thought, you know what, there's a little bit of a gap there, so I think I'll fill that in just to make it extra secure. I haven't done any pinning on these at all. Usually I do a lot of pinning with metal miniatures, but I decided there are plenty of connection points. For example, both of the feet and usually part of the buttocks will be touching the chicken, so there were 3 parts to glue down. So even if there is a bit of a gap, it's not imperative that that's filled in. I just thought it would look nicer and also make it a bit more secure in the future if perhaps the unit is heavily vibrated, if it's dropped a couple of inches. If it's pure metal on metal, occasionally that can kind of shake super glue loose. I'm sure we've all been there. So I like to have a bit of green stuff in there to cushion the blow a bit. I find units like this are an excellent trap for opponents that may want to get their greasy hands on your models as well. With the spears all pointing directly upwards, anyone that tries to get their hand on these is risking his own life. So because they have the inbuilt bases, I've pressed them down into a layer of milliput which has covered the entire base, and then I've done all the sand and rocks after that. I think I'm going to go for a green ghostly colour scheme on them, and I've been seeking advice from some high-level painters on how to get that effect nice and smooth and not too grainy looking like some of my other ghosts, so we'll see whether I can pull that off. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to make it look that smooth on such detailed miniatures with all the little feathers and such, but we shall see. So here we have the completed unit in all its poultry glory. Now there weren't too many complications at all with painting these. I decided to go for a very simple scheme, but I think it's quite effective. I did some research into how people typically paint ghosts to look nice and smooth, because previously I'd done a lot of dry brushing on my ethereal looking miniatures, and I wasn't that pleased with how grainy it sometimes looks, so I wanted a smoothness. So I went for a grey base coat, and then a couple of really thinned layers of wash over the whole thing to get all the crevices picked out, and then some more pinpoint washing with just purely darker green washes into certain crevices, for example the folds in the clothes, around the eyeballs and such, anywhere that I wanted to be darker, so it's not quite so dull looking across the entire miniature. And I think it's been quite effective. In addition to that, because they're metal, I did my usual routine of varnishing, which is a layer of gloss varnish and a layer of matte varnish, and I found that varnishes tend to take off the very top layer of washes from the really raised parts of a miniature, so the cheeks on the face, for example. So I decided this would prevent me from needing to use an actual highlight in those areas, because the varnish would effectively eat away a little bit at the wash in those spots. So I decided that would take the place of a highlight, and it would save me some time as well. So the gloss varnish, then the matte varnish all over. It usually takes a couple of goes to get that just right, because when it's wet over the top of gloss varnish it's difficult to see which parts you've done and which you haven't. So there's always a couple of armpits and toes left behind at the end that need to be gone over again. And after that, it's the same basing I've used on the rest of the army. Lots of nice grass tufts, different colours of grass, and some very cheap pound shop water effects on both of the bases to form these little pools. I didn't go too over the top with the pools on this one, just a couple of small ones. But I think overall the look is very, very tasty indeed, and I'm looking forward to seeing these as part of an army out there on the table. Just need a few more units and I should be able to field a sizable force. I think these are going to fit in very, very nicely as the Honour Guard. They are supposed to be height 3 in Kings of War, which I think works out okay because my other cavalry are a bit shorter than these. With them being upright chickens, they are a bit taller, so I don't think it'll be too difficult to tell what they are on the table, especially since the base is much larger than regular cavalry units as well. If you're thinking maybe that this colour scheme is a little bit too boring for such magnificent models, then the simple solution to that would be for you to go out and purchase some of these for yourself from the Assault group and paint the plumage in whichever colours you deem the most interesting. And with that, I'll leave you with some beautiful images of these models set to some rather creepy music, I think. Ta-ta.